So hype right now. Anything's possible. I'm on mama. I'm on my lady, ma. Anything's possible.
Rain and Jay's back with the vengeance. All the real Celtics fans in attendance. This the truth like 34. This like walking in the garden when you hear the roars. The crowd goes crazy. Most in-depth coverage on the daily. Mainly podcast royalty, the content kings. When you talking about the franchise with 17 rings. Focus like Danny at the deadline. Global but it got a local feel like the red line, the blue line, the green line. Play it in between time. I'ma throw my C's jersey on in the meantime and press play. When the F's done, I can't wait until the next day. Trying to stay in tune with the C's, that's the best way. Melly.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Thank you for making this show part of your daily routine. Normally I'm here for you Monday through Friday, but this week, 3 episodes this week. I did one Monday, today, and then Friday as we wrap up our deep dive into the Brad Stevens era. I'm John Karalis. I cover the team for Boston Sports Journal. I host the show generally again on a Monday through Friday basis, which next week, when the preseason begins, I'll be back to doing 5 days a week. But for now, we're getting into the final 2 episodes of the Brad Stevens deep dive with Chuck McKenney and Mike Dynon, and now the aftermath of the Kyrie era. That Kyrie said out of nowhere, yeah, I called LeBron. I told him, like, yeah, I see what you're saying. I get like leading is not all that easy, which is such a kind of backhanded, douchey thing to say. Because now first of all, he puts himself on LeBron's level, and he's slapping everyone in that locker room in the face by saying, "Yeah, man, I called LeBron to tell him I'm having a hard time leading these guys too." Like, what? So that was, I'm sure that Brad wanted to do things differently. I cannot confirm this, but I firmly believe this, that Danny was in that, look, we need to re-sign Kyrie. We need to make sure we bring him back. This is the key to winning a championship moving forward. And Brad's like, he's screwing everything up. I need to do something. And Danny's like, just give it a little time. Let's just get through it. Let's just re-sign it, and then we can figure it out. I fully, wholeheartedly believe that at some level of that kind of conversation transpired between those two. And I'll tell you why I believe that. Because the next season, after Kyrie left, Brad Stevens comes into media day, and we asked him, what did you learn about, from last season? What did you learn from last season? And he said something like, I learned that everything I believed to be true about basketball was true. And he said like something like that. And it was very clear that he's saying, I wanted to do things differently. We bent because of Kyrie, and it all fell apart. And I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I did it anyway. And now I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah, I would like to ask you a question, John. Since you
Sure.
were there, how did we get? I'm still not clear on how we got from Kyrie saying I'll re-sign if you'll have me, to a year plus later, he's conspiring with Kevin Durant at the All-Star game to go to Brooklyn. What changed?
Yeah.
What drastically changed?
So Kyrie's version of what changed is that he said that his grandfather died, and that reshaped his priorities, and suddenly things that he once believed to be important were no longer important. I don't know if that.
I've heard that.
I don't know. I mean, what can I can't sit here and say that that's not true because I haven't talked to Kyrie. So I'm sure some level of that is true. He wanted to go back home. He wanted to be closer to home. He was done with the Boston to New York to New Jersey thing, whatever. I'm sure some level of that is true. But also I'm sure some level of it is that Kyrie didn't like some of the things that were in place in Boston. He didn't like that He didn't make the choice that he wanted to make his own choice. He didn't want to be traded to a team. He wanted to be able to say, I'm making a choice for me to go to a team. And for that team, by signing him, saying like, okay, we are handing the keys of the franchise over to you, that he may not have had all of that. So I certainly believe that some of that stuff with his family and changing his priorities, I certainly believe that some of that is there. But I do believe also that this is basketball stuff, that once things started to go bad in Boston and he realized he couldn't do the things that he thought he could do with the Celtics, then he decided that he had enough and he wanted to go. Look, we do have to keep in mind that Kyrie switching teams is a constant thing throughout his career. He switched high schools. He only went to Duke for 1 year. He goes to Cleveland. He asks out of Cleveland. He goes to Boston. He has these like stretches of, okay, I'm happy here. Now I'm not happy here anymore. And I would not be surprised if in 2 years he says, I'm not happy in Brooklyn anymore. I want something else. That's just part of Kyrie's MO. We're going to continue the conversation after I tell you about our sponsors. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows. Then you're watching the highlights on your phone, and your neighbor's best friend's login gets you the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract, so get rid of the clutter and the confusion. Get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
Yeah, I can see that. It just came to me that in retrospect, when he said it's going to be crazy, G, he was right, but it wasn't the way we started it.
Not the way it was supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah. That whole scenario was that entire thing devolved to a point. I mean, the New York press conference, that whole thing, all of a sudden, I had this feeling of like, maybe, Danny Ainge was saying all the same things. He was saying the right things. The wedding date is still on, like all of that stuff. And I was like, maybe it is. You have no idea what he and Durant were talking about. Turns out the people who said that they were conspiring, they were right. They were actually conspiring at that point. And when he came back, he really, his attitude towards basketball, towards us, really, really turned quickly. Because at the beginning, the first year he was there, or even earlier that season, he seemed okay, but he really turned and soured. And I just don't think they had any plan other than let's just try giving him everything that he wants, and hopefully he feels comfortable enough staying here. And it didn't work. So,
I mean, he's not the first guy to lash out at the media, but I think what we witnessed was he's a terrible communicator. He would say things and then in turn get upset at reporting that was accurate. Like, he's just one of those guys that I think doesn't understand even the words that are coming out of his mouth. He's also a word salad guy, but he would just lash out just to lash out. And it was just was he, between body language and the things he said and the way he led. I was team Kyrie the whole way. I was like, this is just part of you gotta kiss the ass. This is the nature of the game. This is what you gotta do. You gotta appease the superstar because you need the superstar to get to get the title. But and then that playoff series with Milwaukee, he was just watching him play, jacking up shots.
That was brutal.
One point saying that, we're going to be fine because I'm here. And then he played horrible, calling off defensive rotation so he could guard Giannis. Like, right? I mean, it was just the worst of the worst, coupled with, and it's not like his play was in that Milwaukee series was anything to write home about. He just was, he really was the worst of the worst. And you said it, like, fascinating guy, charitable guy, social justice guy. Like, he does a lot of good things. I'm not here to attack his character, but him as a basketball player and a leader in that year and a half he was in Boston was just I don't even know what's the right word. He was just sour, and it was almost rotten. And I could see him infecting. If you had to choose sides, I don't know how you could choose Team Kyrie in that whole thing.
Yeah, I had this kind of epiphany when Tristan Thompson came in and called the regular season horseshit last year. It hit me that these guys, Kyrie and Thompson, learned how the playoffs work, how the regular season works, how winning works from LeBron. And the rules don't apply to LeBron because LeBron can do all of the things that they were saying. LeBron could say the regular season is horseshit and be right, because when LeBron flips a switch, he actually has a switch to flip. And he's like, oh, yeah, I was coasting. Now we've got 2 weeks and 3 games to make up for the top seed. No problem. Boom. He becomes, godlike, and they go on a big winning streak, and he carries it through the playoffs. But Kyrie and Tristan Thompson playing alongside him go, oh, okay, that's how this works. That's how you do it. You coast, you turn it on, and then we're fine. There are two distinct things that happened in the 2 most disappointing seasons in the Brad Stevens era. That 2018-19 season and this past season, those 2 guys were on each team. One of those LeBron disciples was on each team, and they each came in and said, hey, we'll be fine once we get to the playoffs. Don't worry about the regular season. It's okay. All we need to do is be healthy and be good when we get to the playoffs. And they weren't healthy and they weren't good. And after the season, I remember sitting there in Milwaukee asking Brad Stevens about it, and he talked about championship habits. He must have said championship habits 100 times in that series. And the Celtics never built those habits because the most prominent voices in the room, Kyrie, then Tristan Thompson this past year, are like, hey, guys, yeah, don't worry about this thing that just happened. We know we kind of sucked, but just brush it off. Just get ready for the playoffs. We're going to be okay. And there's no LeBron to back that up. There was no LeBron on that team. There's no LeBron on this team. There's no LeBron on any team except for LeBron's team. And that, I think, is a pervasive kind of thing that I think Brooklyn's going to be fine because they still have Harden and Durant. But the Kyrie belief that I know what it takes to win a championship, and Tristan saying I know what it takes to win a championship, is fully based on LeBron-centric logic. And these teams can't deal with that. They're not equipped to deal with that because there's just no megastar on this team to be like, I don't care what drama there is, I'm going to rise above it because I can. Back to wrap up today's show in just a minute. First, got to tell you about today's sponsors. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar on the market. Take my word for it. It's delicious. It tastes like a candy bar, but it is healthy. Every one of these Built Bars has 17 to 18 grams of protein, only about 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, 4 or 5 net carbs, and you got flavors like raspberry mint brownie, German chocolate, cookies and cream. How can those delicious flavors be healthy for you? I don't know how they do it, but they do. If you've got a nut allergy, no problem. If you are on the keto diet, these work. You can go check them out. They're the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team, which is pretty cool. Go to built.com and check it out. They've got a bunch of different products that are constantly dropping. They've got built puffs. They've got the built balls, different things for different people, gluten-free options. So go to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 every time you go. Doesn't matter if you buy one box. Doesn't matter if you buy the assorted box and try something and then figure out which flavor you want to buy. Just use that promo code LOCKED15 every time you go to built.com for 15% off. Football is officially back. They're back on the field, pro and college, and BetOnline is your number one spot to bet on it all. So go check it out. Updated odds, props, and contests, including online's biggest $500,000 NFL mega contest and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest open right now at BetOnline. Head on over to the website, use your laptop, use your mobile device, and you're going to get a 100% welcome bonus with the promo code Locked On. Create your profile, set it all up, use the promo code Locked On. You make your first deposit, whatever it is, they match it with their 100% welcome bonus. So you're winning right away. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on your favorite sports and your favorite Vegas casino games. So don't wait. Take advantage of all the great offers going on right now at BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Please gamble responsibly.
I'll give you that. You're absolutely right. But what does it say about the young players on this team when Kyrie comes back, right? And they're all dapping him. Is dap still a thing that the youngsters say? They're all loving him up, and saying nothing but praise for him. And then when that report this year came out about Tristan Thompson being problematic and not following the protocols and always going out, and then I think it was Jaylen and Kemba who were like tweeting out the no cap or whatever it is, basically saying it's lies. Well, if they're not recognizing the problem with Thompson and or Kyrie's leadership and logic, what does that say about them as future leaders? Should we be worried?
Well, I think they can like the person. I think they can still like the person and not agree with the leadership, right? Just because they stood up for Tristan Thompson, doesn't mean that. I don't know. I don't know why. I really don't. But being in the locker room with these guys and kind of, you're still going to war with them, and they're still nice guys, personable guys. Like I liked talking to Tristan Thompson. I just think he's not good anymore, and I just don't agree with what he said when it comes to that. And like I said about Kyrie, I think Kyrie's a fascinating person. I don't think when we're talking about Kyrie, like he's a bad human being. There's none of this has anything to say about him as a human being and him as when his guard is down and he's not talking to the media. Like I understand, like I never expected Kyrie to know me, like me, or anything like that. Like I don't care if players lump me in. Like I'd prefer they didn't, but whatever. They're going to have their attitudes about it. Fine. I'm going to do my job. You guys do your job. I really don't get into that stuff. When their guard is down and they can actually be like normal people around other basketball players, we don't know how they are. Like that's why these guys are so they like seeing each other, because they're probably just nice dudes that are fun to be around and generally fun to play basketball with. The other stuff is, these guys have to lead on their own.
You're right in that, you also talk about it was Kyrie stomping on the logo after that playoff game and how, none of the Celtics were pissed off about it. But it all comes back to, we are just, I don't know, it's a generational thing where we kind of view it as basketball in the 80s, where we just thought like, you only loved your teammates and you hated everybody else. Now, when it's everyone says it's the AAU culture. These guys have played together as teenagers and they go off to college and they play on different teams as pros. Doesn't mean they're not still going to be friends, and they're all friendly. So it's just a different dynamic, right? I mean, I think I'm answering my own question, but it's just getting used to that sort of, hey, we can be close buddies, but it doesn't, I don't, like you said, I don't agree with how you lead a basketball team.
In the late 80s, the Pistons played the Lakers in the finals 2 years in a row. Magic and Isaiah were kissing each other before the tip-off.
That's
Right.
true.
So,
Right.
so
Yeah,
it
that's
has
true.
happened, even back in the day. But yeah, Kyrie, in hindsight, it's good that he's gone, and he must hold some kind of grudge. I got to expect he's got some sort of a beef still with that whole stepping on the logo thing. That wasn't just a chance movement of his feet. You know, he did it. He did it. And a lot of the old school guys, like Cedric Maxwell, didn't like it. And, you know, so that there is, to your point, there is a difference between the generations.
Yeah. And
That's
so,
creating,
right. It does because I look at the reaction to, you know, on Twitter, and people are like, oh, he stepped on a cartoon leprechaun. Like, yeah, I mean, it's, you know,
yeah, but it was
that's a
symbolic.
whole, right. That's a whole other thing. I get it. I get both sides of that. Actually, I understand what people are saying, but I do understand. Like, he did that. He did that on purpose. Let's move on here to we've done the Kyrie Irving era, and Brad Stevens' reputation takes a big hit. Let's move on to the Kemba Walker era here, and the last 2 seasons here for Brad. And this past season was so I don't know, such an aberration. I kind of want to lump these 2 seasons in because this is the COVID. You know, we've got Kemba coming in, Kemba getting hurt, Kemba with the knee, COVID coming in, postponing the season, finishing in a bubble, playing this past season on a ridiculous schedule, and Brad Stevens 100% sitting here saying, all right, after these past 2 seasons, I've had enough. Like, I can't do this. I can't be in bubbles. I can't travel without my family. I think having like this realization that I just can't relate to these guys on the right level anymore to be 100% effective. So when the Danny Ainge job opens up and they say to Brad, hey, you interested? He's like, you know what? I kind of am. So these past 2 seasons, I think, were very reflective of how things have devolved for Stevens. He comes off of the Kyrie seasons just beaten to hell. You get Kemba Walker in there, who's a breath of fresh air, but then the injury happens, the COVID happens, everything goes downhill. We'll start with you, Mike. The past 2 seasons, watching Brad, I think it's still the same Brad, but circumstances have changed to a point where now, in retrospect, I can see how things were starting to wear him down.
Yeah. You know, the whole 2 years, there's been so much that has been out of his control. Not just the bubble and the schedule and all that, but like injuries. You know, this past season, they weren't called the hospital Celtics anymore, but they never had even one game where they had all their players, not one game. And so, you know, what is Brad supposed to do about that? I don't know what he could do. So
Right.
There's nothing he could do. And the year before that, with the bubble, I mean, anything could have happened, but they ran into a hot Miami team. Frankly, Spoelstra did a little better coaching job than Brad did. And it's too bad because the Celtics really, if they had gotten by Miami, they could have beaten the Lakers. I don't see why not. This past year, at least we had the emergence of Tatum and Brown, you know, as a legitimate duo. They averaged together a little more than 50 points, and everyone that you hear with an opinion says that Tatum is going to take even another leap. and he could be a top 10 player in the league. And if he is, then the Celtics are going to have a pretty good chance.
All right, one more episode left, and that's going to be on Friday, the final episode of our deep dive into the Brad Stevens era, the COVID era, I suppose, the 2 seasons that were cut short by COVID and what kind of drove Brad Stevens away from coaching here. So that's going to be the final episode. Make sure you're subscribed to get that, and on YouTube as well. And tell your friends that they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network.